The U.S. will take over the Gaza Strip, and we will do a job with it, too. We'll own it.
Loads of you, obviously, voted for Donald Trump. He's the world's most divisive and talked about figure, with some people seeing him as a kind of, well, not even figurative, antichrist, and others seeing him as close as you're going to get to an anointed savior. He carries a lot of energy. Since his administration began, there have been a couple of points that I have noted as being remarkable. Let me know in the comments and chat what you have observed. One, I didn't like seeing your man there from Oracle talking about AI, mRNA vaccines.
Using AI to look at the blood test, you can find the cancers that are actually seriously threatening the person. So we can.
That was a moment of concern to see from a White House podium. And now, of course, the claim that Donald Trump will take over using the indefatigable and considerable might of the American military, Gaza, and develop it into a kind of economic wonderland. Are all wars ultimately motivated by economic interests? Are all wars wrong? What do we think about colonialism? And when assessing colonialism and imperial agenda, what moral and ethical questions do we ask? And what's the statute of limitations? Because I'm an Englishman. We colonized the world. You Americans are still yet the greatest imperial power on earth. What are we going to do morally and ethically when an announcement of this nature is made that seems so utterly transgressive and unthinkable? Let's assess it together, doing our best to understand something that continues to baffle and confuse the finest of minds. We'll have it resolved in 10 minutes.
In a presidency made up of days full of so many headlines, on this day there was just one. It came after the arrival of Israel's Prime Minister to a White House decked out, and a West Wing greeting between two men whose personal relationship has been on, off and back on again. They went inside for private talks, and then came the news conference and this.
The U.S. will take over the Gaza Strip, and we will do a job with it, too. We'll own it and be responsible for dismantling all of the dangerous unexploded bombs and other weapons on the site, level the site and get rid of the destroyed buildings, level it out, create an economic development that will supply unlimited numbers of jobs and housing for the people of the area.
Say what you want about Donald Trump, he's a pretty astonishing political figure. To hear anyone talk about Gaza, a region so redolent with potent feeling, whether that's the strong feeling that a genocide has been practiced there since October the 7th, or the feeling that this has always been part of the Israeli and Jewish people's heritage. Well, to talk about it in terms of just a construction project is almost remarkable in itself. None of us anticipated it. Let me know where you stand on this issue. Is this an indication that Donald Trump is part of a set of global powers that are completely impenetrable and have absolutely seized control of the world, regardless of what shifts on the political surface? Or is this somehow part of a mandate that we expected of Donald Trump? Let me know if you, broadly speaking, support the rights of the Palestinian people, or if you're astonished that Israel has tolerated their belligerent neighbor for as long as they have. Where do you land on this issue? Wherever you stand, and this is what's so difficult, I think, for all of us to appreciate, is that there are brilliant people on both sides of the argument. The same as when it comes to talking about God. There are atheists that are extraordinarily capable and brilliant, and who have considered the depths of epistemology and the breadth of ontology and have concluded there is no God. And then there is the exact opposite. So somehow or another, we're going to have to find a way of holding Israel-Palestine in our minds, acknowledging the scriptural heritage and claims that are made by the Jewish people, and the horror of any war, and in particular the duty of the powerful in situations of conflict. Let's see if Trump's advancing this argument. Let's see if Trump is a catalyst for significant change, and maybe yet something beautiful could be born of this abominable situation.
The reaction from the gathered audience reflected the enormity of what he'd just said.
The U.S. will take over the Gaza Strip.
One lady's actually yawning in the press conference. Did you see that? while we try to comprehend the enormity of what he said. That's what I think what's difficult with 24-hour media. It's difficult to somehow comprehend and conceive of this being relevant and actual and happening in all of our lives simultaneously. You run your hand down your X feed like you might be doing right now, and pornography, people wandering the streets covered in sperm, someone's dog performing a trick, Kanye's naked girlfriend at the Grammys, someone getting their head cut off, children dying in a war, rubble, chaos. This is not a way to receive and understand reality. This perpetual present made technological rather than spiritual is unbearable for all of us. And you can't ever detach this conflict from holiness and holy claims. Do you approach it purely anthropologically and say wherever you have human beings, you have tribal conflict? Or do you approach it spiritually and look at the decrees where a tribe of people are told, this is your land, and the various claims that are made for that land? Whatever this is, it's not a construction site. And wherever this leads, it will be indicative of the future of our kind.
And we will do a job with it, too.
He had just announced the takeover of Gaza, owning it, occupying it. It wasn't clear, and it certainly wasn't expected.
You are talking tonight about the United States taking over a sovereign territory. What authority would allow you to do that? Are you talking about a permanent occupation there?
When that journalist asks what authority could there be? What authority could there be when it comes, in fact, to all government, but there's no issue quite like this one? What authority could grant you the right to take over a land? It's either going to be human authority backed by the threat of military violence, right? That's one option, isn't it? Or God. There is no other kind of authority. Is there bureaucratic authority? Is there administrative, legalistic authority? Where is that authority derived from? Isn't that the fundamental problem that we're facing in the world now? Is we all disagree about where moral authority comes from. Does it come from power? My authority comes from the ability to impose my will on you. Is that what authority means? Or is it a divine right? And if there is such a thing as a divine, isn't baked into that concept the idea of compassion, kindness, service, unity, glory, love, duty? In a sense, if you believe in divinity, if you believe in God, isn't that commensurate with beliefs in love? Let me know in the comments in the chat. Free speech is under attack, but Rumble Premium refuses to back down. That's why you should use Rumble Premium. Support content creators like me, and him, and him, and him, and him. I'm going to say and her, but is there one? And her? Oh, that's good. And her. With major advertisers conspiring to pull their dollars, even brands like Dunkin' Donuts turn their back, claiming Rumble had a right-wing culture. We're not here to fit a mold. We're here to defend free expression. To strengthen this mission, we're excited to offer Rumble Premium, a completely ad-free experience with exclusive benefits. Grow up. For viewers and creators. It's more than a subscription. It's a stand for free speech. Your voice matters. Join Rumble Premium. For a limited time, you can get $10 off an annual plan using the promo code BRAND. Visit rumble.com/premium/brand and claim your discount today. Together we can turn the tide, whether you join Rumble Premium or simply keep watching. Your support helps keep free speech alive. Go to rumble.com/premium/brand and use the code BRAND to get $10 off.
Redevelopment?
I do see a long-term ownership position, and I see it bringing great stability to that part of the Middle East and maybe the entire Middle East. And everybody I've spoken to, this was not a decision made lightly. Everybody I've spoken to loves the idea of the United States owning that piece of land, developing and creating thousands of jobs with something that will be magnificent.
It's not clear who he had spoken to, but even Sky sources close to the top of the Israeli government did not know about the idea. And despite trails of other plans for Gaza, this one came from nowhere.
And I don't want to be cute, I don't want to be a wise guy, but the Riviera of the Middle East, this could be something that could be so this could be so magnificent.
Well, this is pretty staggering, I suppose, just in terms of linguistics, because to divorce Gaza from its history and rename it the Riviera of the Middle East is sort of beyond bold. It's kind of almost heretical from every conceivable side of the argument. It's really, well, look, this isn't normally a pivot that you would expect. Maybe it is, I don't know. I find David Icke to be a fascinating character simply because many of his giddy prognoses have proven to be true. It was David Icke who years ago said that there would be paedophile rings exposed in power and that there were occultist connotations. And you can't absolutely verify that down to the last grain, but we're a lot further down the road of believing that there are peculiar sex trafficking rings in places of power that have connections to governments, say, and certainly institutions within show business. The Epstein and Diddy stories point to that, don't they, enormously, as well as the Jimmy Savile story in my country that suggests that there are sort of connections between power, occultism, sex. These things have unfolded and evolved and developed in ways that are certainly more corroboratable than they were when David Icke was saying this. So let's see what David Icke says on this issue. Now, of course, many people claim that David Icke is an anti-Semite. That's certainly not something that I've ever thought of David Icke. Listen to this. So predictable. The plan all along. Now, bear in mind that David Icke kind of lives with this frustration of like, I've been saying this for ages. Allow Hamas to breach the security fence on October the 7th with no response. Now, that's it, that's the idea that was a false flag event. Okay, that's a big claim. Use this as an excuse to mass murder tens of thousands and to create Trump's building site. It's difficult to look at what's happened in Gaza since October the 7th and not be appalled by the degree of violence, even if you're sympathetic to Israel's historic and religious claims to the land. Say no one can live there now, and Palestinians must be moved to other countries, ethnically cleanse the land. Israel annexes the occupied Palestinian West Bank, secured by Miriam Adelson's $100 million support for Trump. Is that someone that's one of those Israeli lobbyist groups? I don't know. You can tell me, work that out, let me know. Move on to secure Greater Israel and replace the Al-Aqsa Mosque in Jerusalem with a rebuilt, I suppose he means Solomon's Temple. Job done, David Icke. Anyone with open eyes and a desire for the truth could have predicted this outcome long, long ago. And I suppose that's David Icke's frustration that he feels like he's been saying these things for ages. And it's pretty extraordinary that even in the peripheral analysis of a peripheral figure like David Icke, the replacement of the religious sites appears to be at the forefront. Don't you feel increasingly these days that a secular and materialistic analysis for what's happening politically is insufficient? That it feels like such a sort of tectonically and epocally significant time of change and fracture that just going, this is about oil, doesn't seem like enough. These people are trying to get their mitts on the shale gas. Like, it doesn't seem enough anymore. It seems like powerful forces are at work, and I can't even describe them accurately using simply the language of human politics, which ultimately would boil down to urges, wouldn't they? If you didn't believe in God or the divine or the occult or the supernatural, use whatever term you want. If you just believed that we are essentially atoms and molecules that at some point became conscious, then the most powerful forces are drives, like the drive for power or the drive for sex, and then they fundamentally become a kind of pantheon, wouldn't you agree? Like that they become sort of Mars, Venus, the god of love, the god of war. Well, without some kind of divine covenant, we're on a serious precipice now. People that have always provided good political analysis of ongoing and unfolding events, particularly when it comes to wars, are Max Blumenthal and the folks over at Grey Zone. Brilliant journalists. They've obviously picked a side when it comes to this conflict. I think now it's very appropriate to reiterate that the Democrat leadership enthusiastically joined with Republicans to authorize the shipping of over 85,000 tons of bombs to Israel to drop on the besieged Gaza Strip. Of course, Blumenthal's response is to a rather dry post from Simone D. Sanders Townsend. I think it's now appropriate to reiterate that elections have consequences, because I suppose people on the left will be saying, see, Donald Trump, it's not just that we think he's a misogynist and a racist and a rapist, it's that he's going to do crazy political things, like say I'm going to occupy Gaza. Well, it is pretty crazy, isn't it? But isn't the ongoing necessity for perpetual war that appears to be defining our time part of a craziness that goes beyond the phenomena of Donald Trump? The Ukraine-Russia conflict is being perpetuated. That's insane. This ongoing conflict in the Middle East is insane, but has tendrils so far back in time that it's difficult to be blunt or pithy about it. Glenn Greenwald said that we should follow this guy called Arnaud Bertrand. I'm saying it in a French accent, seems right to me. So let's see what he's saying. So Trump is announcing that the US will take over the Gaza Strip, will own it, and then he's parenthesized after ethnically cleansing all Palestinians, or at very least displacing. Notwithstanding the unreal cynicism of it, what owning Gaza would concretely mean is a merger of Israel and the US. Wow, that's a really interesting bit of analysis. Do you think that there are pieces of cartilage that are not fully exposed between Israel and the United States? Let me know in the comments and chat what you think about that, and how the sort of powerful lobbyist interests, for example, within Israel influence American foreign policy. You'll have seen, for example, Senator Thomas Massie talk very articulately about that on Tucker. Let me know what you think in the comments and chat. Israel's problems would be the US's problems like never before, and the US would be permanently associated with Israel in the eyes of the world. Relatively ironic, right after Trump got elected to put America first. Wow. How do you feel about that, guys? How do you feel about that when you use the same analysis that you would use to say all of this military aid being sent to Ukraine is irresponsible, it's perpetuating an unwinnable conflict, and that what we wanted was a president that was going to come in and put America first, American jobs, American interests. Now, what obviously Trump's going to say is that's why he used economic and mercantile language around it. One, because it sanitizes the issue of all of its complexity, but two, because it frames it economically, doesn't it? This is going to be a great project. There's so much going on there. Wait a minute. There's scaffolding, like you're not talking about just construction with something. So that's the way he's gotten past the America First component, is to frame it as an opportunity, as a deal. This being Donald Trump, a deal is how he, we talk about peace deals anyway, so I suppose there you go. It's not that nomenclature should be excluded. Relatively ironic, right after Trump got elected to put America first, which I'm pretty sure didn't include settling a colony in the most conflictual land on earth. Yeah, let me know in the comments and chat, even if you're hard in love with Trump and MAGA, where you see this in terms of the mandate under which Trump was swept into power, the Democratic, the electoral mandate. And in terms of soft power, not sure Americans have fully thought through the consequences of becoming one and the same with an apartheid ethno-nationalist state that's abhorred by such a large proportion of the world's population. That's where I would sort of declare my part. As a Christian, when you read the Old Testament, if you believe in God, and I believe in God, you start to have to acknowledge that there is a unique, particular and sacred relationship between the Jewish people and that land. And I wonder, where is it we're drawing the line of what's acceptable, permissible, and what's not acceptable? Are we saying that the colonization of America, for example, is unacceptable? Certainly would have seemed such to the people that were occupying this land. We're just into such the sort of typical arguments that emerge when discussing this issue. It's very much part and parcel of Trump's usual modus operandi, which is to own whatever accusations are thrown at him and to never make any excuse and double down. Right, that's his MO, which admittedly worked for him domestically because Americans came to interpret it as a refreshing authenticity, or telling it like it is. The world will undoubtedly see an America-Israel merger as authentic in that it had recognized de jure what was de facto already the case. Right, it would just make explicit something that had been implicit. Remember the Max Blumenthal post we just looked at. 85,000 tons of bombs were shipped to Israel, and that was voted for by both Dems and Republicans. So this is not a partisan issue. Trump is a unique political figure and phenomenal, all rolled into one individual. But the tacit support, according to this post by Arnaud Bertrand, of Israel's agenda in that region is not bipartisan, is not one over which the parties are divided. The Dems were arming and supplying arms to Israel. Of course, this is an escalation. No one's quarrelling with that. But an escalation, by virtue of definition, is already on the spectrum of what's already happening. It's merely increased. But the massive difference in this case is that there's no constituency outside America, yes, for Make America Great Again. The US finally being honest about being an ethno-nationalist colonial power will likely instead be seen by billions of people as the final confirmation that the US is definitely not on their side. Well, that's a pretty articulate expression. What I suppose we're all left to wrestle with here is, was that within the purview and agenda of the Donald Trump that you voted for? If you are a person person of the left or centre left, how do you see this as distinct from the policies of the administration that you would support? It's difficult to imagine, I suppose, Kamala Harris saying we're occupying Gaza now, isn't it? But it's also impossible to conceive that Kamala Harris would be saying we're no longer going to militarily support Israel. Isn't that, wouldn't you say that ultimately both institutions within government would have behaved in a similar way, or at least a way that's on the same spectrum? Let me know what you think about that in the comments and the chat. And let me know if ultimately what you want is America to be so focused on America's own interests and for them to be somewhat confined, should we say, geographically, that you see this as an infringement on the deal and an indication that there might be powers that operate politically that are not explicit, tacit, invisible power, to use the phrasing of Arnaud Bertrand, the idea that there are powers that are continually, ulteriorly operating that we cannot impede, obstruct, or even observe. Seems that it's possible, but that's just what I think. Let me know what you think in the comments and the chat.
Hey, thanks for watching. If you want to see more uncensored content where free speech can flourish, join our live stream. Click the link right here to watch the next video if you want to, or become a member of a growing movement. Download the Rumble app and you'll be informed every time we make a new piece of content. Stay free.